Hi everyone. Today I'm going to start off with a question. How many of you have heard of the Great Wall of China? I believe most of you have, if not all of you. Well, how many of you have heard of the Great Wall of Sindh? I believe not many. Ever since I was a child, I have been able to travel different parts of the world and experience different cultures. And whenever I would travel, I would draw parallels between my home country of Pakistan and these places. And I would ask myself that when such culturally significant places exist in my country as well, why aren't they visited as much? Such questions started to increase more and more with time, especially when I went abroad for higher education. And I got to realize the difference between the Pakistan that I experienced growing up firsthand and the way Pakistan was talked about in different classes. And so I asked myself, how can I contribute to bridging the gap between the two? I believe one of the ways to do so is by increasing tourism, especially increasing tourism from foreign tourists, because not only would that allow for more people to experience Pakistan and for Pakistan to have an improved image in the world, but also for Pakistan to increase its economic growth. So, for my final project, I'm looking at promoting tourism in three sites in Sindh province of Pakistan. The first of these three sites is Rani Kot Fort that you're seeing on your screen. Rani Kot Fort is the largest fort in the world, and it is a tentative UNESCO World Heritage Site. The second site the second case study I have is Shah Jahan Masjid, located in Thatta, which was made by the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan Masjid is also a tentative UNESCO World Heritage Site. The third site, Makli Necropolis, that I will show you in a couple of minutes, is the largest necropolis in the world. And it is a site that is home to a million graves, approximately a million graves, and spans over 15 square kilometers. Makli is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Let me walk you through the criteria that I used for selecting these sites. There were three things that I was looking at. Firstly, I wanted the sites that I look at to be either tentative UNESCO World Heritage Sites or actual UNESCO World Heritage Sites, so that the sites that I look at are already recognized for having cultural and heritage value. Secondly, I wanted to look at sites that have proximity to a big city, which in this case is Karachi, the most populous city of Pakistan. The reason why I wanted to select sites that are close to a big city is so that whenever a foreign tourist or a domestic tourist is visiting a big city, they should be able to visit these sites on a day trip basis. Ranikot Fort is approximately 4 hours away from Karachi by drive, and Makli and Shah Jahan Masjid are both approximately 2 hours away. The third thing in my criteria is that I wanted to select sites in consultation with UNESCO Pakistan, my client for this project. Before I move on to the recommendations, I want to emphasize that my recommendations that I have made in this paper are in line with helping achieve SDG 11.4, which is protecting and safeguarding world's cultural and natural heritage. This is a picture of me from my field visit to Makli in March, where I went to understand the situation at hand to be able to better create strategies for these places. The first of my four recommendations is I'm advocating for there to be a novel concept of tourist economic zones. Many of you may have heard of special economic zones, SEZs, where uh, where in a certain area to encourage economic activity, certain economic incentives are given. I believe this idea can inspire the idea for tourist economic zones in order to give economic incentives for there to be more commercial activity near tourist sites. This can be done by giving, say, tax exemption to hotels and restaurants and big businesses near these sites so that commercial activity can be established. This tax exemption can be for a few years only, so that once commercial activity is established, the tax exemption can be taken away. The second recommendation that I make is inculcating heritage education in school and university curriculum. It is not only important for for school students to know about these sites for awareness purposes, but also for that awareness to lead to demand for these sites in the future. Secondly, university students can work on specialized projects. Say there could be website making case competitions for different sites. There could be surveys and other projects that university students can do, cultural mapping projects. And what this will do is it will add a practical component to university education, and it will help government use its resources and help have university students do some of the work for them, creating a win-win situation. The third recommendation that I make is that there needs to be an official cultural policy for Sindh. Currently, Sindh does not have an official provincial cultural policy, and in order for such effort to take place in a structured manner, it is important for there to be a policy. It is also important for such a policy to advocate for and ensure that the work is done in a responsible and sustainable manner, because over tourism can also become a problem. And lastly, my last recommendation is that is advocating for Rani Kot Fort and Shah Jahan Masjid to go from being tentative UNESCO World Heritage Sites to actual UNESCO World Heritage Sites. These are the four recommendations I make, and thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to everybody's questions.
Okay. Thank you, Fatima. Again, another very exciting and very different way of looking at development, and some great recommendations. One of the conversations we had along the way, you and I, as you went into this, is somewhat the balance between tourism for those outside the country and tourism for those inside. And how do you balance that? I mean, is there I don't know, presumably there's a value, an economic value in bringing people in, and a value, political economy value for the nation to have it recognized, the history and the heritage, but also presumably there's a in countries of the world that could maybe perhaps use a little bit more of a sense of unity and whatever. Is there a role to play in tourism on the domestic side as well?
I definitely agree. International tourism and domestic tourism will call for different things. There will be more need for accommodation and English signboards and tour guides being able to speak different languages for international tourism. So the need for infrastructure will vary for both, but domestic tourism can be more consistent and can be more casual. So both are important. One can have more implications for representation of Pakistan in the wider world. The other one can have more everyday implications for the commercial activity being more every day. I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm happy to say more.
Yeah, no, that's good. And what about financing? Is this where were the financing for these type of things? Presumably, there's a certain amount of investment in the infrastructure around it, but also the protection, perhaps rebuilding, or whatever one does to prepare a site for tourism from the outside. How do you see that coming to play?
So in my research so far, I've seen different governments work with Pakistan on different projects. Like Italian government is working on a project, the Norwegian government is working on a project. Some of it can be from different governments. The other could be pitching a project to the Sindh culture, the government's culture ministry, and then they pitching it to the Ministry of Finance. So I mean, for the local government to work on it, they really need to see the economic potential in it for them to be convinced. And that is hard to make when there's not a lot of numbers involved already. But it could be from foreign donors or from within the government, Pakistani government.
Okay. So how about some other questions? You're probably getting tired of me listening to me ask the questions here and there. What do we got? Here we've got Glenn talking about cyber archaeology. Now that's an idea. What do you think of kind of, is there a technology play on this? So it's maybe not just people coming in from all over the world, but how can technology facilitate what you're trying to accomplish?
There's two types of cultures amongst many, intangible, intangible. So I definitely believe that technology can play a role, especially for intangible cultures. There could be virtual tours to these places. Virtual tours have become an even more widespread thing during COVID. So there are many strategies on how to do that. Intangible culture also includes more music and culture that can be consumed without being there. So I believe that technology can play a huge role, ranging from tapping into social media to create better awareness and having more other projects like virtual tours.
Mm-hmm. Mark Coopersmith, one of our entrepreneurship gurus, always thinking about how to make this work on a business side. But creating the supply is one thing, by the heritage sites and whatever. But how do you create the market for this? Is there a marketing piece of this that you've been looking at?
There isn't a marketing piece that I have looked into very deeply. I was thinking of working with students and creating awareness as a form of creating demand from the youth. So, and then those students becoming the market for tomorrow. And once students start visit, if there's like feedback loop of, hey, how was your visit? What did you enjoy? What did you not like? Using that feedback to better inform the tours of tomorrow, the visits of tomorrow. And then that consumer-based understanding will help better understand that, well, students wanted there to be more bathrooms or more restaurants, and then how can that inform future planning?
Mhm. And I imagine the whole kind of customer experience and the side, the food and the arts and the crafts and everything else that kind of goes with it probably makes helps that word of mouth get even deeper. Let's see. Uh, Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Is there of the international market? Is there, is this more likely to be folks from the region, tourists from the region around Pakistan, Middle East? Is it Europeans, Americans, other Asia? Where do you think the market might be for this?
So it depends on how the marketing strategy goes. If some of these places are marketed more as faith-related sites, then whichever faith they speak to, I know Makli has a diversity of different spiritual diversity. So if they are marketed in a certain way, then people from that faith can perhaps be more encouraged to visit. Other than that, I was not looking at a certain region in specific, but I do believe that Pakistani diaspora that lives abroad could use this cultural tourism as a way for them to be connected to their countries as well. So that was one of the things I was thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up the question of religion, and I think that perhaps, and we've talked about this as well, is one of the obstacles of, quite frankly, just the perception of strife and different Pakistan not being a safe place, and how does how can the tourism sector, the government, the private sector, and others kind of get over that reluctance that may hang over attempts to really build the tourism sector?
That is definitely a question beyond the scope of my work, but I will say this, that I think seeing is believing. A lot of people visit places and then their mind changes. So whatever the power of a first-hand experience cannot be changed by just watching a documentary. But I do believe that that takes in some personal curiosity from the person themselves, but also a little more work from the country side of better marketing campaigns of different kinds.
Great. Well, listen, thank you very much. And